Have you ever wondered if the golden circlet upon a brow is a crown or a gilded cage? Could you endure the silent, suffocating pressure of 1,000 expectations before your eyes even open to the light? What if the very walls built to protect your bloodline were actually the boundaries of a prison made of cold, uncompromising granite? Is the privilege of command worth the absolute loss of personal solitude? Do you truly believe that power feels like silk? Or is it more akin to the jagged edge of a rusted blade pressed against your throat? You wake not to the soft sunlight of a modern morning, but to the oppressive, damp chill of an American stone manor, a reconstructed fragment of a feudal past, where the air smells of extinguished tallow and ancient dust. The silence is not peaceful. It is heavy, laden with the rhythmic breathing of servants who have been awake for hours, moving like ghosts in the periphery of your consciousness. Your skin crawls against the coarse linen of your shift as the heavy velvet curtains of the great bed are pulled back with a metallic rasp of rings against wood. The transition from the warmth of fur blankets to the biting air of the chamber is your first lesson in the fragility of comfort. You stand and your feet meet the uneven, freezing surface of the floor, a reminder that even in the height of luxury, the earth remains unyielding. There is no privacy here. Your body is a public vessel, a symbol of the land and the lineage that must be dressed, groomed, and presented as an icon of stability. You feel the weight of the wool and the restrictive pull of the embroidered surcoat as it is cinched tight, forcing your posture into a rigid display of unshakable authority. Every layer added is a barrier between your humanity and the role you must play. The morning ritual is a choreography of subservience and silent observation. You watch the steam rise from a silver basin of lavender-scented water, feeling the sting of the heat against your face, a sharp contrast to the draft that whistles through the narrow arrow slits in the masonry. This is the foundation of your day, a structured sequence where every movement is calculated to project an image of divine order. You walk toward the heavy oak door, the sound of your own footsteps echoing with a hollow, rhythmic thud that seems to announce your arrival to a world that demands your constant attention. Outside the chamber, the manor breathes with the frantic energy of those whose lives depend on your favor. The air thickens with the scent of wood smoke from the great hall and the metallic tang of sharpening steel from the courtyard below. You are the center of a complex machine, a functional heart that must beat with regularity, or risk the collapse of the entire social anatomy. As you descend the spiral stone staircase, feeling the rough texture of the wall against your palm, you realize that your identity is inseparable from these stones. The architecture is not just a shelter. It is a physical manifestation of your hierarchy, designed to make you feel elevated while simultaneously grounding you in the responsibility of defense and administration. The morning light filters through stained glass, casting elongated, distorted shadows across the rushes on the floor, creating an atmosphere of shifting perspectives and hidden depths. You are not merely a person. You are the living bridge between the raw survival of the peasantry and the abstract ideals of the court. This stability is bought with the currency of constant vigilance, a perpetual awareness that the very structures providing your safety are the same ones that mark you as a target. The morning meal awaits, but the flavors are secondary to the political hunger of the men standing by the hearth. You take your seat at the high table, feeling the grain of the wood beneath your fingers, a solid presence in a world of fluid loyalties and whispered intentions. Every eye is a mirror reflecting your own projected strength, searching for a crack in the masonry of your resolve. You must govern not just the land, but the very air in the room, ensuring that the rhythm of the household remains steady despite the underlying currents of ambition. The morning is the crucible where your authority is forged anew each day, a relentless process of affirmation through presence and ritualized action. You are the architect of this micro-universe, yet you are also its most prominent inhabitant, bound by the laws of tradition and the necessity of display. As the first hour passes, the weight on your shoulders settles into a familiar ache, a physical manifestation of the crown you wear, even when the metal is not touching your skin. This is the reality of the noble life, a magnificent, echoing solitude shared with hundreds of people who see you only as a function of their own security. The sensory details of this existence, the smell of wet stone, the flicker of torchlight in the shadows, the distant ring of a blacksmith's hammer, all serve to reinforce the permanence of your station. You are the anchor in a sea of uncertainty, and your every breath must signal an unwavering commitment to the preservation of this order. Through this lens of structural power, we begin to see the true cost of the feudal contract, where the individual is sacrificed for the sake of the institution. As you prepare to face the petitions and problems of the day, the gravity of your position becomes an inescapable truth, a density of experience that few can truly comprehend. This journey through the layers of medieval American nobility is only beginning, and the deeper we go, the more the stone begins to reveal its secrets. The transition from the private chamber to the public hall is a transition from the man to the myth, a necessary evolution for the survival of the collective. Every detail of your environment is a tool of governance, from the height of your chair to the specific spices in your wine, each element working in concert to maintain the delicate balance of the social ecosystem. As you look out over your domain, the coldness of the stone is no longer an enemy, but an ally in the quest for lasting influence. You are the warden of this reality, and the day has only just begun to test your structural integrity. Confira-se já é inscrito neste canal to ensure you possess the key to every hidden gate within this narrative, because understanding the past is the only way to survive the complexities of the future. The weight you carry is heavy, but it is precisely what prevents the world from drifting into chaos. Stay with us as we peel back the next layer of this stone reality. You step into the Great Hall, and the sheer volume of the space hits you like a physical weight, a cavernous monument to the architecture of authority, where every stone was laid to make you feel both infinite and infinitesimal. The air here is different than in your private chambers. It is thick with the scent of burning pine, the musk of damp hounds, and the metallic tang of polished steel. You feel the grit of the floor rushes beneath your boots, a chaotic carpet of dried vegetation that hides the debris of yesterday's governance. The scale of this room is a deliberate psychological weapon designed to diminish the individual while magnifying the office you hold. As you walk toward the dais, the sunlight cuts through the high clear-story windows in sharp, dusty shafts, illuminating the fine embroidery of your silk sleeves against the brutal, grey indifference of the granite walls. This contrast is the essence of your existence, the extreme refinement of your personhood, held in a constant tension-filled embrace by the raw, unyielding strength of the fortress. You sit upon the high chair, and the wood feels cold and hard, offering no concession to human comfort, because comfort is a luxury the structure cannot afford. Before you, a line of petitioners begins to form, their faces a blur of anxiety and unspoken needs, each one a tiny vibration in the vast web of your administration. You listen to disputes over land boundaries, the theft of a breeding sow, and the petition for a marriage dowry, realizing that these mundane grievances are the very mortar that holds your world together. Every decision you make is a brick placed in the wall of your legitimacy, and every hesitation is a crack that could invite collapse. The administrative burden is not merely intellectual. It is a sensory experience of constant scrutiny and the low, persistent hum of communal expectation. You feel the scratch of the parchment as you press your seal into the hot red wax, the smell of singed lacquer rising to your nostrils as a permanent mark of your will. Between the layers of silk and the cold stone, there is a space where your true self resides, yet it is increasingly difficult to find that person amidst the relentless demands of the hall. The temperature in the room fluctuates as the great doors swing open and shut, admitting blasts of the unpredictable American wilderness that claw at the edges of your curated civilization. You observe the way the light catches the silver chalice on the table, a bright spark of vanity in a room built for survival. This is the duality of your power. You are the shepherd of a flock that both fears and relies on you, a role that requires you to be as immovable as the mountain and as fluid as the river. The whispers of your advisors are like the rustle of dry leaves against the stone, constant and irritating, reminding you that your authority is a shared performance. You feel the tension in your jaw, the physical manifestation of the need to maintain a mask of absolute certainty, even when the path ahead is obscured by the fog of political intrigue. The Great Hall is a theater of the concrete, where the abstract concept of law is made flesh through your presence. Every object in this space has a functional purpose in the maintenance of order, from the tapestries that dampen the echoes of dissent to the heavy iron chandeliers that cast a flickering, uncertain light on the faces of your subjects. You are the conductor of this silent orchestra, and the music you play is the stability of the realm. As the morning turns to afternoon, the physical fatigue of sitting in state begins to settle into your bones, a reminder that even the most powerful body is subject to the laws of biology. Yet, you cannot falter. To show weariness is to suggest fragility, and in this world fragility is an invitation to predation. You watch the dust motes dance in the light, a fleeting moment of beauty in a day defined by the heavy lifting of governance. The texture of the day is a tapestry of contradictions, the softness of your gloves against the rough grain of the petitions, the heat of the hearth against the chill of the shadows. This is the architecture of authority, a structure built not just of stone and mortar, but of perception and ritual. You are the prisoner of your own palace, bound by the very laws you interpret and the very people you command. The weight of the world is not a metaphor. It is the physical pressure of the air in this room, the silence of the waiting crowd, and the unyielding support of the stone beneath your feet. To exist here is to understand that power is a relentless cycle of consumption and redistribution, a fire that must be fed with your own time and spirit to keep the darkness at bay. The hall is a vacuum that pulls everything toward its center, and you are the immovable point around which everything else revolves. This is the burden of the lineage, a heavy, silent duty that transcends the individual and links you to the ancestors who carved this reality out of the wilderness. As you look into the eyes of the next petitioner, you see not just a man, but the entire weight of the social contract pressing down upon you, demanding a resolution that honors both the law and the survival of the community. It is a moment of profound, terrifying connection, a reminder that you are never truly alone, even in your most private thoughts. Comment the phrase, "My life is a gilded cage of my own making," if this reflection on the heavy price of ancient power resonates with the hidden depths of your own soul. You realize that the grandeur of your surroundings is merely a distraction from the fundamental truth of your isolation. The granite does not care if you are tired. The silk does not care if your heart is heavy. Only the structure remains, demanding your absolute devotion to its continued existence. You rise from the chair, the sound of the wood scraping against the stone echoing through the hall like a thunderclap, signaling the end of the session and the beginning of the next phase of your duty. The transition from the public gaze to the private walk is a moment of intense release. Yet even here, in the corridors of your own home, the walls continue to watch, the echoes continue to follow, and the architecture of authority remains as rigid and unforgiving as ever. You are the master of all you survey, but you are also the first servant of the stone. Stay with us as the sun begins to dip lower, and the feast of consequences begins to take shape in the cooling air. The sun begins to set over the jagged American horizon, casting long bloody streaks across the granite face of your manor, and the great hall transforms from a place of cold litigation into a cauldron of sensory excess. You can feel the temperature rising as dozens of torches are jammed into their iron brackets, their orange flames licking the air and releasing the thick, acrid scent of pine resin and scorching soot. This is the banquet of consequences, a calculated display of abundance designed to mask the ever-present threat of scarcity that haunts the world outside these walls. As you take your seat at the center of the high table, elevated above the noise and the growing heat, the air becomes a physical presence, vibrating with the cacophony of barking hounds, the rhythmic clatter of pewter against oak, and the low, predatory rumble of hungry men. The floor, once a silent expanse of rushes, is now a chaotic theater of movement where servants scurry like ants, carrying massive silver platters piled high with the flesh of the land you claim to rule. You inhale deeply, and the scent is overwhelming, a dizzying collision of roasted venison, fermented ale, and the sharp, acidic tang of wine that has traveled too far. But beneath these familiar odors lies the true scent of power, the dry, dusty heat of exotic spices. You look down at the salt cellar, a masterpiece of silver filigree shaped like a ship, and you realize that its contents are worth more than the lives of the men serving you. This is the social hierarchy of the palate, where the sting of black pepper on your tongue is not just a flavor, but a declaration of global reach and logistical dominance. Every grain of cinnamon and every pod of cardamom represents a trade route conquered, a mountain crossed, and a human life spent in the pursuit of your prestige. You watch the flickering light dance on the surface of your wine, and for a moment, the golden liquid looks like molten lead, heavy with the responsibility of maintaining this fragile theater. The sensory overload is a deliberate strategy. It is impossible to think of rebellion or dissent when the senses are being drowned in such deliberate, aggressive opulence. You feel the grease from a roasted bird on your fingertips, a slick and primal reminder of your place at the top of the food chain, yet the very silk of your tunic seems to shrink as the room grows smaller with the press of bodies. The noise is a wall of sound, a mixture of boastful laughter, and the subtle, sharp clink of knives that reminds you that every guest is a potential rival. You are presiding over a feast that is also a battlefield, where every toast is a test of loyalty, and every shared dish is a communal pact of survival. The contrast between the refined sweetness of the honeyed pears and the raw, iron smell of the blood pudding mirrors the precarious balance of your own authority. The delicate veneer of courtly intrigue stretched thin over the brutal reality of feudal force. You observe the musicians in the gallery, their melodies struggling to rise above the din, providing a thin, ethereal layer of culture to an evening defined by visceral consumption. The heat becomes a second skin, making your robes feel like armor, heavy and restrictive, as you navigate the treacherous waters of dinner conversation where a misplaced word could mean the end of a truce. This is the moment where the concrete reality of your architecture meets the abstract demands of your status. The hall is no longer just a building, but a living, breathing organism that feeds on the resources of the surrounding countryside to sustain your legend. You see the flickering shadows on the high ceiling, distorted and monstrous, reflecting the internal anxieties that no amount of spiced wine can fully drown. The banquet is a functional necessity, a mechanism of redistribution that ensures the local lords remain satiated and the servants remain cowed by the sheer scale of your waste. Every bone thrown to the dogs is a calculated gesture of surplus, a signal that in your domain the threat of winter is held at bay by the strength of your storehouses. Yet as you look out over the sea of faces, you realize that this abundance is a mask for a terrifying fragility. If the harvest fails or the trade routes close, this entire sensory monument will crumble back into the silent dust from which it was built. The pressure of being the provider, the protector, and the ultimate consumer begins to throb behind your eyes, a rhythmic reminder of the toll that leadership takes on the human soul. You reach for your goblet, the cool metal a brief respite from the humid air of the hall, and you realize that even this simple act is a performance for an audience that never stops watching. The spices burn in the back of your throat, a lingering heat that stays with you long after the dishes are cleared, a physical ghost of the power you wield over the elements and the earth. Through this fog of indulgence, you must remain the clearest mind in the room, the anchor that prevents this celebration from devolving into the chaos it so narrowly avoids. You are the architect of the feast, the master of the hierarchy, and the sole witness to the exhausting labor required to keep the illusion of permanence alive. If you find yourself captivated by this immersive descent into the sensory reality of a world built on power and porcelain, leave a like on this video to signal your place among those who seek to understand the structural weight of history. The night is deepening, and the echoes of the banquet are beginning to shift into the hushed, dangerous tones of the after hours. The light of the torches is dying down, leaving behind a thick charcoal haze that clings to the tapestries and the stone, marking the transition from the public display of the feast to the private shadows where the real decisions of the realm are made. You stand to leave, and the room falls into a sudden, expectant silence, the weight of their gaze pressing against your back as you exit the hall, leaving the remnants of the banquet to the shadows and the hounds. The air in the corridor is cooler, but the smell of the spices follows you, a persistent reminder that once you have tasted this level of authority, there is no returning to the simple flavors of a common life. The structural integrity of your day is being tested by the sheer mass of the expectations you have fulfilled. And the evening's final chapter is yet to be written in the dark corners of the manor, where the architecture of authority becomes a labyrinth of secrets. Stay with us as the torches flicker out, and we enter the silent, watchful hours where the true cost of the crown is finally calculated in the cold moonlight of the American frontier. The transition from the roar of the banquet to the suffocating silence of the upper gallery is not merely a change in volume, but a descent into the true jagged anatomy of your power. You walk through the narrow stone corridors where the air is thinner, cooler, and stripped of the distracting perfumes of the feast. Here, the flickering shadows cast by your lone tallow candle do not dance. They crawl along the uneven masonry like silent witnesses to every compromise you have ever made. This is the Gallery of Whispers, a structural necessity of the American manor designed to allow the elite to observe without being seen, a physical manifestation of the paranoia that is the inseparable twin of authority. You feel the rough, unyielding texture of the lime-washed walls against your shoulder as you press into the darkness, listening to the muffled echoes of the world below. The floorboards beneath your feet groan with a low rhythmic frequency, a reminder that even this massive fortification is a living, shifting thing that can settle, crack, or fail at any moment. You realize that your entire existence is predicated on the stability of these stones, yet the stone itself is indifferent to your survival. In the dim light, the tapestries that line the hallway appear as grey, spectral figures, their woven histories of conquest and lineage dissolving into the gloom. You are moving through the administrative nervous system of the realm, where the light of day never fully reaches, and where the most dangerous weapons are not swords, but the hushed, urgent syllables of political intrigue. You stop near a heavy oak door, and the sound of muffled voices drifts through the cracks, a reminder that power is never held by one person alone. It is a collective hallucination maintained through 1,000 secret agreements. The fragility of your position hits you with the force of a physical blow to the chest. If one advisor turns, if one alliance fractures like the dry timber in the hearth, the architecture of your life will implode, leaving nothing but ruins for the forest to reclaim. You are the architect of this system, but you are also its most vulnerable component, the singular point of failure in a complex web of mutual dependency. The sensory experience of the evening is one of extreme isolation. The warmth of the banquet is a distant memory, replaced by the biting reality of the American night that presses against the thick glass of the lancet windows. You watch a single moth batter itself against the pane, drawn to the light of your candle, and you see yourself in its frantic, futile struggle against the transparent barriers of your station. The air smells of damp earth and old iron, a primal scent that reminds you of the graves of your ancestors and the inevitable destination of all your striving. You feel the weight of the key in your hand, a heavy, cold piece of forged metal that represents your control over the treasury and the armory, but it feels like a lead weight dragging you down into the bedrock. This is the moment of peak structural tension, where the abundance of the day meets the scarcity of the soul. You are surrounded by beauty, by history and by people, yet you have never been more alone than in this gallery of shadows. The contrast between your outward magnificence and this internal hollow is the fundamental truth of the noble experience. Every decision you have made today has been a gamble against time and human nature, a desperate attempt to stay the hand of entropy for one more night. You look out over the darkened courtyard, where the watchman's lantern flickers like a dying star, and you understand that your authority is only as strong as the belief of those who sleep beneath your protection. If that belief falters, the stones will offer no sanctuary. You are a prisoner of the very order you created, bound by a code of conduct that leaves no room for error and no space for mercy. The silence of the gallery is not empty. It is filled with the ghosts of the decisions you didn't make and the paths you didn't take. As you prepare to retreat to your final hours of rest, the gravity of the lineage feels like an atmospheric pressure, crushing your lungs and slowing your heartbeat. You are the bridge between a glorious past and an uncertain future, a structural element that must remain rigid even as the foundations shift. Share this journey with someone who understands that true power is not found in the light of the throne, but in the courage to face the shadows of the gallery, ensuring this story reaches those who value the deep, hidden layers of our shared human history. The night air whistles through a gap in the masonry, a high-pitched, lonely sound that seems to echo your own internal monologue. You blow out your candle, and for a moment the darkness is absolute, a total erasure of the self into the vast, indifferent night of the frontier. You are no longer a lord or a master. You are a single consciousness, trapped in a fortress of your own making, waiting for the dawn to restart the cycle of performance and preservation. The structure holds for now, but the whispers in the walls continue to murmur of change, of decay, and of the inevitable collapse that awaits all things built of stone and pride. You turn toward your chamber, the darkness guiding you by memory rather than sight, a final act of trust in the architecture that defines your world. The shadows have spoken, and their message is one of profound, inescapable responsibility. Stay with us as we move toward the final light, where the legacy of the lineage is weighed against the dust of the earth. Have you ever wondered if the final rest of a ruler is a sanctuary or a final submission to the very earth they claim to own? Could you face the terrifying silence of a midnight chamber, where the only thing louder than your heartbeat is the crushing weight of a name that must outlive your flesh? What if the legacy you carved into the world was as transient as the mist rising from the American valley, destined to be forgotten by the very stones that sheltered your pride? Is the promise of immortality through bloodline worth the absolute exhaustion of a soul that has forgotten how to simply exist? Do you truly believe that history remembers the man, or does it only preserve the cold, hollow shell of the office he once filled? The final hour of your day does not end with a triumphant flourish, but with the cold, rhythmic ticking of a clock that exists only in the mind, measuring the slow erosion of everything you have built. You return to your private sanctuary, yet the room feels larger and more hollow than it did at dawn, as if the very stones have expanded to swallow the remnants of your identity. You move to the window and look out at the American wilderness, a vast, undulating sea of darkness that ignores the borders you have drawn on parchment. The glass is cold against your forehead, a transparent barrier between the fragile order of your manor and the entropic chaos of the natural world. You realize then that your legacy is not the stone, nor the silk, nor the silver you have spent the day defending. Your legacy is the memory of the stability you provided in a world that craves destruction. This is the transition from the concrete to the philosophical, where the physical structure of the castle begins to dissolve into the abstract structure of history. You feel the weight of the day lifting from your physical body, only to settle more deeply into your spirit, a density of experience that transforms your understanding of time. You are no longer living in a single day, but in a continuum of centuries, a link in a chain that stretches back to the first man who piled one stone upon another, and forward to a future that will see these walls as nothing more than a curious ruin. The sensory details of the room, the fading warmth of the embers, the scent of lavender on the pillow, the distant, lonely howl of a wolf, all serve as punctuation marks in the final sentence of your daily narrative. You understand now that power is not a possession, but a temporary loan from the earth, and the interest on that loan is paid in the currency of your own vitality. The structural integrity of your life depends on your ability to accept this inevitable decay with the same grace you use to command the banquet. You lie down, and the bed feels like a tomb, yet also a cradle, a place where the man is finally allowed to exist apart from the myth. The architecture of authority has done its work. It has protected the lineage for another 24 hours, providing a theater for the performance of civilization amidst the raw elements of the American frontier. But as your eyes close, the stones begin to lose their definition, becoming fluid and ghostly in the half-light of your exhaustion. You are drifting into the realm where names are forgotten, but the consequences of actions remain, a space where the noble and the peasant share the same silent substrate. The contrast between the heavy reality of the morning and the ethereal lightness of this moment is the final revelation of your journey. You have been a warden, a judge, a provider, and a symbol, yet in the dark you are simply a witness to the passage of time. The legacy you leave is not written in the granite, which will eventually crumble into dust and be reclaimed by the forest, but in the structural impact of your presence on the lives of those who look to you for order. This is the true elevation of the narrative. the realization that the material world is merely a scaffolding for the human spirit. You have navigated the layers of hierarchy and the labyrinths of intrigue, and you have found that at the very center of the fortress there is only the quiet, persistent heartbeat of a soul seeking meaning in the midst of duty. The day has been a microcosm of an entire era, a concentrated dose of the privilege and the pain that comes with the crown. As the final echoes of the manor fade into the stillness of the midnight hour, you accept the solitude of your station as a sacred trust, a burden that you will take up again when the first light of dawn touches the battlements once more. The cycle of power and memory is the only true permanence in a world of shifting shadows. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel to continue exploring the depths of other times and the structures that still shape our reality. If you watch this far, it is because you like this case. Leave a comment saying "You assisti a te aquí," so I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Like this video if the journey through medieval nobility touched your perception of the weight of authority, and share this documentary with those who seek to see beyond the surface of history, revealing the hidden gears that move the fate of nations and men. The silence is now absolute, the vigil has ended, and memory is all that remains before the new sun.